Yeah, no mai, haere mai ki Aotearoa. It's wonderful to be able to host you in Wellington this afternoon, and it's fitting that one of our first guests since the COVID-19 pandemic is the Premier of a country with which we have such close whakapapa and special constitutional relationship. Aotearoa New Zealand and Niue have been through a challenging 2.5 years, and I did want to recognise here Niue's great success in keeping COVID-19 out while it has achieved world-leading vaccination rates in preparation for your border reopening last month. And those vaccination rates really are exceptional. Now, we've worked closely together with Niue throughout the pandemic, from preparedness and resilience to response and recovery. And we discussed today, Premier, how New Zealand will continue to stand with you and support Niue as you reconnect with the world and respond to the recent but expected, obviously, emergence of COVID-19 at the border. We remain absolutely committed to our relationship, which is special and unique with Niue. Earlier, the Premier and I signed a refreshed statement of partnership, which reflects the deep cooperation and connection between our two countries, and also provides a path forward as we work together to navigate and plan for recovery from the impacts of COVID-19. In that light, we discussed a range of issues critical to both Niue and New Zealand, and to Te Moana Nui a Kiwa. We've also reflected on the challenge that climate change poses to us and how we can strengthen our cooperation in this area, and specifically what role the climate finance that New Zealand has put forward and committed that at least half of the $1.3 billion of that climate finance will be for the region, and what role that can specifically play with Niue's ambitions. We are committed to providing funding support around Niue's climate change priorities. We've also exchanged views on regional issues and the importance of regional unity, and shared the view that engagement in the Pacific, of course, should always be around advancing Pacific priorities, but this was a theme that was strongly shared throughout the Pacific Island Forum. Ultimately, though, it's been a delight to be able to share some time with the Premier today. Niue holds a very special place in my heart and my family's heart, and so to be able to welcome you here, Premier, has been fantastic. So thank you for joining us today. I'll hand the time over to you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Whalawhalahi atu, and kia ora to Aotearoa and the people of New Zealand. Indeed, as you all know, this is my first visit since I became a leader, even though it's 2 years down the road, but that's all due to COVID. But here I am, and how fittingly, and timely also, that we have these discussions after our meetings in the forum. And this is all to do with climate change and all other matters, which is of most interest, not only to Niue, but also for the region as well. And as we discussed this morning also, Prime Minister, that reaffirmation of that unique relationship that between New Zealand and Niue. It's almost 50 years in 2 years' time that we have this arrangement in place. And this is all about a reaffirmation of that unique arrangement to ensure that we uphold that arrangement, but also acknowledging the support that Niue has received throughout the years, throughout these arrangements, but especially in difficult times and challenged times such as the COVID that we experienced 2 years ago. So what we're doing now, or what we're experiencing now after opening the borders, is what you experienced a few years back. But as we all know, we can't keep closing our borders as we have to move on, and in order to survive, we need to revive our economy as well. But that is what all these arrangements is all about, and New Zealand have certainly stood up to that arrangement by supporting Niue in these difficult times, and of course the ongoing annual support. And I think our discussions this morning really brings that back out into the limelight of how important that we continue to have a conversation on an annual basis and now and then. But times to change, and of course we also got to look to the challenges ahead and what is ahead of us in navigating our waka through these times.
Kia ora. Thank you, Premier. We're now happy to take questions. I'll try and navigate the question time on both of our behalves. Please just let us know who you'd like to direct the question to.
Premier, how is the COVID situation going given those cases 2 weeks ago in New Zealand sending the medical support over?
The COVID situation at the moment is stable. And again, how thankful we are in that relationship that we have with New Zealand, that realizing that we are reopening our borders and we have some support on the ground from here, which really helps. As you know, it's not easy. The locals, but it's the 4th week now since we opened, and I heard that a few things has been it's settled down at the moment. I think we have 5 active cases right now, and 23 or 28 all up since we detected the first case, but they're all recovered cases. So far, so good. It's just a matter of, I guess, getting that mind of thinking that these things, it's the new norm. It's not only in Niue, but it is in the Pacific and, of course, over here in the rest of the world.
You'll look to change or alter your quarantine or pre-departure testing requirements given that those 10 cases then sparked the need for additional support?
No, we're not going to change the setting right now because I think the setting that we have, it's pretty robust as it is now because we only just opened and we want to gradually relax on some of those settings as we move forward, but that depends on what's happened on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just in terms of that renewed statement of partnership, I mean, how does it specifically reflect the recent changes in the Pacific, is in regard to geopolitical competition and COVID recovery needs?
I'd say specifically for Niue in New Zealand, it's reaffirmation of an existing relationship. Certainly from our perspective, our relationship with Niue is special. Obviously given our history and the arrangements that we have. And so this declaration really is a reaffirmation of that. And certainly the message I heard from the Premier was that we both saw that as an important opportunity for us to reaffirm that in a very changing environment, that we stand firm in that relationship. You know, if anything though, Premier, I think the COVID-19 experience has just demonstrated to us that our relationship is very strong, but is also wide-ranging. We've long had, connections between our health system and work that we've done together on capability and capacity building, but I think it's been a demonstration point of how we can very quickly mobilise, work together, exchange information, but we hope also make sure that it's not just about teams coming in, but leaving capacity and building capacity in the process. And so we've got a public health person on the ground there for another few weeks. The idea being supporting the team who are already there to continue doing a great job.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we have that and more engagement in ministries and on higher level. But I think the key here is to ensure that for us, it reminds us that we do have that arrangement in place and the responsibilities between the two parties. And I think that is significant to be remembered. And as mentioned, we shared all these, but it's just reaffirming that arrangement that we have in place.
Yes,
Me?
Go ahead, I'm sorry, and then I'll come back down.
Earlier this year, it was a question for the Premier. Earlier this year, you met with the Chinese Foreign Minister on Zoom. It talked about deepening bilateral cooperation with China. What does that mean for you? And what is China offering that New Zealand isn't, or that we could be offering instead?
Well, we met with the minister just like every other countries do. But you'll probably recall that we did not sign any documents. But we do have that relationship, and it's all about technical support. and some of the things that required at home. It's not that New Zealand can't do. It's what it's more strengthening in the other areas that has been required, such as the roading is. At the roading, it's not a cheap. It's a very expensive infrastructural exercise. So the offer is there, but as always, we got to be very cautious in any of the dealings that we have, and it's not only China but also other diplomatic partners that we have similar arrangements with.
Yes.
Nanaia to Alicia from RNZ Pacific. Premier, I have a question, a couple of questions actually. The first is about the priorities for the people of Niue, both in Aotearoa and in Niue itself, about oceans, climate change. What are Niue's priorities?
Priorities is always about the oceans. And as you know, and you will find out a new concept, a new initiative of what we're doing. But we are already, by law, protected 40% of our EEZ with as a no-take zone, and now it's 100% as controlled. So it's all about oceans for us. As you know, we are in the middle of the big vast ocean, so we're taking every precautions, or taking everything that we ensure that the ocean space has been protected. But I think for us, it's also about sustainability and moving forward. So climate change is a threat to that, of those ambitions of ours, and that's why climate change is that's up there as a single threat, not only to Niue but to the region as well.
Have you been in contact with Kiribati since the exit from the Pacific Islands Forum, and are you both confident that there will be a full 18-member congregation next year in the Cook Islands?
Certainly the last contact we had was when the chair conveyed to us that he had spoken directly on the last day of the forum with the president of Kiribati, and that was really heartening to hear. And I think that final message that we heard was that that the forum door, of course, remains open, and that Kiribati considered that their door remains open also. I think we're all hopeful that we'll see full Pacific Island Forum unity by the time we meet again, but ultimately that will be for Kiribati to determine.
Yeah, well, these things are fresh. Sometimes it takes time to sort of start to realize what their decision that's all about. But as mentioned, there will always be the family of the forum, and the door is always open when they're ready to return.
Ben.
Premier,
Oh, okay. We'll finish here, and then I think I saw Claire. We'll leave you as our last. Okay, Ben.
Premier, there have been reports of population decline in Niue during the pandemic. Is this right? And what are your sort of economic sort of aspirations at this time?
I'm not sure about that. If anything, we pride ourselves in the last few years of our numbers is starting to grow again. The government has put out their not only policies but their direction of moving forward, and we're pleased to say that they're working together, not only with New Zealand, but the Whale project that we're working on, that we can engage some of our own Niueans who are professional and experts in whatever areas. Instead of them coming to the island and work on the island, they can work from here. As we know, most of our people here, they have other commitments, even though they wanted to come and support and work in the islands, but they do have commitments, so we realize that. So how we deal with that, they can still work from here in supporting us, but we're starting to see a fair bit of our own people returning home. So we make sure as a government ensure that the rest things in place that interest our own people of returning. So. And you can only see that in some of the new infrastructures that is starting to pop up around the island.
Secondarily, so much emphasis at the Pacific Island Forum is around climate change, and there's been criticism from various Pacific Island nations around Australia's targets on climate change and its refusal to countenance the blocking of new coal and oil and gas projects. Is this criticism that you would also levy at Australia?
Well, let me say that I am pleased with the new leadership. I think the new leadership has started to recognise what the Pacific region is calling for, and I am very hopeful after our discussions is that they are very, now they sort of listen and very supportive of some of the issues that has been raised by the leaders from the Pacific. So that is pleasing, and let's hope that continue as we move forward.
I'm aware that I haven't taken a question from TVNZ and Pacific Media, so we'll conclude there.
Whakalofa to Premier Elijah from Pacific Media Network. I want to know one of the key pillars for Niue is about keeping that relationship strong with the 30,000 Niueans that are here in New Zealand. What kind of support would you like to see or provide to our new 30,000 Niueans here in New Zealand? And is there anything that the New Zealand government can do to help out in that regard?
I think,
particularly around language revitalisation and reconnecting with their culture.
Yeah, I think this is going to come down to our tupunas that are here. Let me put the numbers, some numbers into perspective. The highest ever population in Niue is 5,400 and how many years back? If we're talking about the 30,000, we're talking about the descendants that were born here. These are New Zealand Niueans. So we've got to put the numbers in perspective. And we're talking about the culture and the language. And that's what I mean, that we have to rely on our tupunas that are from Niue in order for that to continue the survival of our language and culture. And something that we do acknowledge and we do realize that needs to be pay a close attention to it. Hence, we're very strong back home in advocating for this purpose, for the language and the culture.
I may add, Premier, we also feel a sense of responsibility to foster and support and ensure the ongoing preservation of Pacifica languages for those who are residing in New Zealand. And one of the things you'll see is that we do monitor and keep an eye on, of those who are New Zealand born, the movement in the preservation of the language amongst that cohort as well. You'll see that, of course, we're trying to revitalise the Pacific Language Weeks. We're trying to ensure that we have access to core language resources in our schooling networks and the ability to access and learn the language in New Zealand as well. So we take that seriously and we're doing some work there, but it is fair to say, I think, that it's a job not done, and we have to make sure that we continue to monitor whether or not we are seeing an uplift in the knowledge and language. Then I will finish with... Okay, RNZ.
Thank
we'll
you.
We'll finish there.
So I do have to ask about the Commonwealth Games. How are the preparations going for yourself and your son? We'll finish on a light note.
Well, you're an athlete, so it's natural that they would want to ask.
I was hoping no one would ask that question. Well, the preparation, well, I'm not so sure about preparation, but I know the team's been training very hard. I'm looking forward to joining them tomorrow on their way out to Birmingham. So. Yeah. Wish us all the luck. I know it's pretty warm there, just like Niue, and the grass it's similar to what we have back home. But participation in these things are very important. It's one of those life experiences that you can't take away. But mindful also that the games it's our head of state's games, the Queen, the Commonwealth Games, it's the Queen's Games. So it's important to have our presence there.
And maybe perhaps someone could do a wee job and find out whether or not the Premier's son is the youngest competitor in the sport. At 14 years of age, I would wager he might be, but we couldn't answer that question ourselves. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.